You're off and ready, are you? Well, it looks like the chair is absent today, so in his absence, you gotta put up with me. Ah, could have met me at the door and arm wrestled me, but I'm sorry, Dane. You just missed that chance. All right. We'll call the meeting to order for Budget and Finance as of today. Ask any of the committee members, is there any conflict of interest declaration on anything we see? Certainly can be declared if it does arise. Number three, we do have a presentation from our 2024 audit. Tracy and Priya? Sorry, I said Priya. And yes, I'm just going to say Tracy and Priya. Because if you think I messed up that first name, I'm not even going to try Priya, your second name. I just apologize. I have trouble with Tracy's last name. Good to see you, Trace. And you have a presentation for us. There we are. Even got the new logo up there for you. Wonderful. Oh, I probably have to turn.
There we go. Okay, I'm on. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the committee for having me here to your meeting this afternoon. I did make it through the stoplights in ample time. Mary Lou did warn me to to come early, so we did make it here on time. I do have Priya with me this afternoon. So Priya was the audit senior for the audit for 2024. This is the first year that I'm presenting to you as M&P and not BDO. So as of January 1st, 21 rural BDO offices were transitioned to M&P. So all the local offices, partners, the staff, everything, all of the BDO offices in Grainbruce and the surrounding area are now operating as M&P. So M&P is it's a Canadian firm. It was established in 1958. It has 150 offices from coast to coast. So again, it is a national firm. So M&P's business model is designed to support its clients and its team members and its communities with a locally focused approach, but we still have the resources of a national firm should we need any professional services at a national level. So I would like to thank Mary Lou and Sue and Garrett and all the team for their assistance provided during the audit. They always do a fantastic job in helping us make the audit go very efficiently. So I click. Well, it's not going to click. You click to the next slide for me. Thank you. As your auditor, it's our responsibility to communicate with those charged with governance. Our findings report is in the agenda package. It is the one with the fuzzy picture. A picture is actually meant to be fuzzy. That's not a misprint. The fuzzy picture and the coffee mug with the M&P logo are on all the standard communication from M&P. I'll present a high-level overview of the letter to council and the auditor's report, and then I'll present portions of the draft financial statements. A full, complete copy of the financial statements has been provided in the agenda package. This year, we also provided some highlights of the county's performance using some graphical analysis, so I hope you would find that useful. If you have any questions, please ask as we go through the presentation, and I can stop and answer any questions as we go through. Next slide, please. M&P has substantially completed the audit of the 2024 consolidated financial statements. In order to release the financial statements, we do need approval from council. We also need to get the receipt of a management representation letter and do subsequent events review work up until the approval date. On an annual basis, we are required to confirm our independence from the county. And we can confirm that M&P is independent from the county and qualified to issue an audit opinion on the financial statements. Our materiality for the 2024 audit was 4.8 million, which remained unchanged from our preliminary assessment. There were no significant deficiencies found in the internal controls that were tested as part of our audit. And we found no unadjusted differences identified during the course of our audit. So the management team prepared a very complete comprehensive package that there were no adjustments that we found during the audit. Next slide, please. So management is responsible for preparing the actual financial statements. It's our responsibility as your auditor to issue an audit report on those financial statements prepared by management. An audit opinion is the highest level of assurance we can provide as a public accountant. And we believe that we have obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence to provide an unqualified opinion. So our opinion is in the second paragraph, and in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, which basically means we did not find any issues during the audit, and we give a clean opinion on those financial statements. There is an other matters paragraph that you'll see this year that's different from the prior year. So it does say that the 2023 financial statements were audited by another auditor, even though you still had the same audit engagement team. We signed under BDO last year. We are signing as a M&P this year. So we have to have that disclosure in there. The responsibilities of management and those charged with governance are highlighted in the middle of the page. And those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the county's financial reporting process. On the next slide is just the responsibilities of the auditor and described in detail. Moving on to the next slide is the statement of financial position or the balance sheet. So that's a snapshot in time at a point in time on December 31st of 2024. At December 31st of 2024, financial assets totaled 139 million and included 128 million in cash and investments. The increase in trade and accounts receivable is because there was almost 900,000 more owing to the county and HST, 1.4 million in grants received after the year end, and an increase in interest accrual. So no issues with any collectibilities of that increase in the accounts receivable. At December 31st, 2024, liabilities totaled 96 million, and that included 29 million in normal trade payables and accrued liabilities that were paid subsequent to the year end. It also includes 50 million in deferred revenue, and that is broken down in the continuity schedule on page 30 of the financial statements. The deferred revenue includes 25 million in unspent development charges and 9 million unspent Canada community building funds to be spent in future for future capital projects. So these are really reserves that are legislated, so they don't get recorded as revenue until you actually spend the money. If until they are spent, they stay on the balance sheet as a liability. There was also 11 million received late in 2024 for the long-term care redevelopment in advance of the expenditures being incurred. So that made the deferred revenue a little higher than it has been in the past. Net financial assets is 43 million and is a key financial indicator. It is the total liabilities or total financial assets less liabilities. So a positive means that you have resources for the future. The net financial assets did decrease as the reserves decreased by 3.7 million as the reserves were used for capital projects. Non-financial assets includes your physical, tangible capital assets, your land, buildings, roads, bridges, vehicles, and equipment. It's important to note that that is recorded at cost less amortization, so that's not at the replacement cost. The replacement cost would be substantially more than it's being carried on the balance sheet. Accumulated surplus is 316 million and is the equity of the county. It includes both monetary assets and your physical assets. Details of that balance will be later in the presentation. The next slide is the statement of operations and accumulated surplus and reports all the transactions during the year. Revenues totaled 194 million, included taxes, user fees for various services, grants, and other revenue. Included in revenue are all the external resources for revenue for operating and capital, but it does not include any transfers from reserves. The expenses include all operating costs. Expenses do not include actual capital purchased or transfers to reserves. When you look at the budget expenses are significantly different from the actual because amortization is included in the actual amounts. And that's required under the accounting standards to estimate the wear and tear on the physical assets from the use. So on the next slide, we have removed that, the amortization from the expenses. And we'll look at that in a minute. But just finishing off on this page, the total revenues less the total expenses for the year is the annual surplus of 23 million. And again, it's important to note that that is not your operating, that is not your operating surplus. The operating surplus was almost 4.4 million. That was transferred to reserves. The 23 million annual surplus is what's used to pay your capital assets and in the current year and in the future. So that number has to be a large number, and it should always be a large positive number. So as again, on the next page, I noted that we have the expenses excluding the amortization, so you can see that it's much more comparable for the budget to the actual amounts. The next statement is statement of changes in net assets. So we take that $23 million annual surplus that we talked about from the statement of operations and we adjust for the amortization and the actual capital purchases. During the year, 43 million was spent in capital projects. The statement comes down to a decrease in net financial assets of 4.7, which agrees to the change in the financial assets on the balance sheet. The 2024 budget had anticipated the long-term care redevelopment being further along, so it is in a large negative number. That's because it's a negative number because you were going to take money out of reserves and also get debt financing. So that didn't happen at the end of 2024. That was moved to 2025. So that's why there's a big difference between what was budgeted for a decrease and what was the actual decrease. The next slide shows the accumulated surplus. So again, this was the equity that was on the balance sheet of the $316 million. So this is the only place that you would see the operating surplus or deficit if it was not transferred to reserve. But on April 24th, the county management team presented a report to council with details regarding the 2024 operating surplus. And so as a result, it was transferred to reserve prior to the year end. The invested in capital assets is 265 million, with 1.1 million still to be financed and 4 million financed by internal debt that's being repaid annually. The unfunded post-employment benefits are estimates of future costs based on actuarial valuations and will be funded on an annual basis as the costs are incurred. And the estimate of asset retirement obligation also remains unfinanced until the costs are actually incurred. The next slide is your budget note. And this provides a reconciliation of the accounting back to the public sector accounting standards. So really just wanted to show this slide because it highlights in your budget column that your budget actually did come to zero and you weren't budgeting for a big surplus or deficit. So there are adjustments that need to be made because of the difference in the accounting standards and the way you budget on a cash basis, because you are required to budget on a cash basis on a modified accrual basis. So not including the post-employment benefits and the ARO and amortization. So that's the highlights of the actual financial statements. And again, the full statements are in your package if you have any questions on those. And as I said this year, I just gave you some color to look at instead of the boring numbers, because sometimes it's easier to get a visual from what's happening looking at the numbers. So if we can go to the first slide, it just looks at the cash balance and your investments compared to your net assets. So seeing a steady, the yellow line is the net financial assets. So that has been steady over the last 5 years. So all these graphs are based on a 5-year basis. The next slide shows your reserves and your discretionary reserve funds. So a small increase in the reserves in 21 during COVID as capital projects were on hold, and then reserves have had small decreases in the last few years as they've been utilized. The next slide is the obligatory reserve funds. So again, this is the one that shows in the deferred revenue on your balance sheet in the liability section. And it includes the yellow is the Canada Community Building Fund, and the blue is your unspent development charges. The next graph just looks at the sources of revenue, and we compare that to 5 years ago just to give kind of a background of where you were and where you are now. So you've been fairly consistent on the funding sources between the 2 years. The grants have gone up slightly, which kind of explains the next graph, where we look at the functions, the expenses that the county has incurred by functional area. And so you'll see it that you've had an increase in the human resources functions, the expenses that you pay as a result of more funding that you're getting from grants and those to pay for those programs. The next page is the expenses by object. So this is the salaries and materials, contracted services. Again, fairly consistent from the prior year. And then that's a very high level overview from a graphical perspective. So just before we go to questions, I would like to inform the council that after 38 years of auditing, I will be retiring at the end of the year. I would like to do a special thanks to Mary Lou and Sue and Garrett that I've worked with in different places, not just here, for making my career so rewarding. So with that, I will take any questions. No.
Anybody? Said she's retiring. She didn't tell us what she's going to do. 2026, that's retirement. Huh, there's an election that year. Guess we'll see you around the horseshoe here. Any questions for? Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Tracy, and certainly, though premature, but certainly wishing you all the best down the road. Budget note 8, under budgets, you spoke to the progress in Rockwood Terrace as being a contributor to this, but just a question to staff, Mary Lou, or yourself. If you could expand on the transfers to reserves, transfers from, and the subsequent capital acquisitions, the variances are a little more significant than some years. I think it was 13,000 in 23, 18,000. We budgeted 14 in transfers. If you could just expand a little bit on those numbers, thanks. Sorry, this is out of the presentation. I had noted on the page, it's budget, it's note 8. That would be page, if it stops scrolling, page 11. It's the last one before the graphical information.
So while I was scrolling, I couldn't scroll and listen at the same time. Could you repeat that for me? Your question? Sorry.
Just if you could expand on the body there, transfers to reserves from and the capital acquisitions. Rockwood Terrace contributes to some of that variation from budget. But just because of the numbers, if you could expand on that, really.
Okay, so part of the transfer to reserve or the budget column, if we had more money than we needed to use out of levy, it went to reserve and we used grants first. So that's a big part of it. And then under the capital acquisitions, where we had a budget of almost 102 million and we only spent 42.2, that is largely Rockwood Terrace. There'll be a few projects, say for housing and for transportation, that maybe didn't get done, but the bulk of that is the long-term care program.
Okay, anybody else? Well, then. If there's no other questions, I guess we're looking to probably get a motion to receive the statements and that the treasurer be authorized to approve and sign the financial statements. You're keen on that, Mary Lou? You got your pen ready, or is it a stamp you use? And an auto pen, and then move it to county council. Tara would be July 10th meeting. Okay, so that's the motion that's there. Dane, move that. Thank you, Warren. Seconded. Any other questions, comments on the motion? Then I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Tara. Oh,
Just at the recommended motion, the last clause is that staff be authorized to proceed prior to county council approval as per section 26.6B of the procedural bylaw 5134-22. So as Tracy mentioned, there is work that they do up until they release the statements. So the longer that we delay releasing the statements, or the longer they test. So not wanting, I'm sure Priya would like some vacation and they'd happy to be done with us as soon as they can.
well, it sounds like Chasey's, made it very official. She's done with us, so. Okay. So that part is still just in the motion, just a little explanation on it. Thanks. Mary Lou. All right. Nothing else? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion is moved. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for, I think, been at it for quite a few years. We haven't been at it as long as the MNP since 1958, you said, and MNP was, yeah. 58 was a very good year, but yeah. Yeah, it was. I started that. Yeah, didn't start MMP, but I started back then. Anyways, thank you very much again, Tracy, and well deserved. Thank you. Mary Lou.
I would just like to thank Tracy, Priya, and Vicky, who is not here today. Their team has been very good this year to work with. Not that they haven't been good every year. It's one of those things that if I wanted to ask somebody, when they come to my office and say, do you have a few minutes? And if I said the auditors are here, somebody in transportation joked once that that's what a reversing entry is. People back out of your door and they flee. Tracy's team, they've made it very easy for our team to work with them. And I'd also like to thank everybody in the finance department as well as the departments that we support. We ask a lot of questions sometimes at year end, wanting to clarify things, getting things right. And there's a lot of hours that go into, I'd say, making this look easy. And it's a far cry from when we did the 2020 audit and Kevin Wepler delivered 17 3-inch binders to BDO, and they sat in quarantine for 5 days. And that's the last year we had the hardcover binders. And I must say, doing things electronically does make things a lot easier, especially if you have to replace one page and you don't need to go to the book, hole punch it, everything go back. And it made things a lot easier for them when they need to, or if they want to work remotely after hours. So it's just a big thanks to Tracy and her team, and to our team as well.
Great. I did have one comment, Tracy. You mentioned that the picture was clouded, was foggy, so even with those pictures as cloudy as what they are, you truthfully say this is a clear audit? I knew you would be able to. Again, thank you very much, ladies, and glad that are we the first one to know about this little, transformation in life? Yeah. Okay, do we keep it secret? This is good because I'm not going to keep it secrets. Okay, again, thank you very much. Bring us down to number 4A. Capital budget. Who wants to spend some money? Well, I was going to start with IT. I was going to start with Jody, but yeah. Who's got the big one? I can see transportation running. Yeah. Who wants to start? Scott or Jody or Kevin? What do we pick a number, flip a coin? Okay. Jody's on the list to be starting first. Jody, on capital requests from IT. Floor is yours.
There's a lot of things that are IT things. Going through the assets and the projects that IT has, I'm going to work through them sort of by category, because the questions that I'm addressing in terms of how we choose to replace them and how we prioritize them and how we fund them is more common depending on what the type of equipment is. So I'm going to look at the assets that we have that form the core network. Essentially equipment outside of that is just attaching to the network and serving some other purpose. A few projects that we have in the capital budget that are recurring but don't generate any assets. I'll talk a little bit about our telecommunication towers and then just touch on the advanced fire radio communication project. So for the network, we have 62 networked locations as part of the county, and those are areas where we have staff present. We're providing internet. There's some other level of resource there in terms of cybersecurity or phone or people are actually working and plugged into the network. So in those sites, we have 243 wireless access points. So again, I think everyone knows what that is, but a wireless access point, if you're using your computer or you're using a phone and you're getting internet at a county site, you're connecting to a wireless access point to get that internet. We have 68 switches, so the switches sit in our closets, and again, anything that's connecting to the internet, whether you're connecting to a wireless access point, that access point will go to the switch, or if you're directly hardwired into the network, if you have a printer or a phone or anything like that, those connect back to the switches. The switches control traffic, they control the internet in and the traffic out, and they also allow us to group assets based on mostly based on function, but it's a cybersecurity thing as well. So if you have an issue in one department, it can't necessarily get across to computers in another part of the county. And then we have 62 firewalls plus an additional 4 for redundancy. And so what the firewalls are, anytime you're doing anything on the network, if it's internet coming in, if it's stuff that's happening between computers, the firewalls are scanning all of that traffic and they're looking for things that is essentially malicious, that would be bad on the network. Some of that is category. We're just blocking certain categories of stuff you shouldn't do at work anyways. You can't do because of the settings of the firewalls. And then there's other things that are signature based, like traditional antivirus. So if something does get across, but the firewalls recognize it as a bad thing, they can shut that down. The 4 redundant firewalls are here and at the 3 long-term care homes. And so basically, if we lose a small site, we can get another firewall deployed pretty quickly, or we can solve that problem and we just accept the fact that there may be a disruption to a few people working. But if we lose the admin building, our main data center, or if we lose one of the long-term care homes, and that's a much bigger disruption. So the idea is the firewall that protects the internet traffic there, that protects the network, isn't a single point of failure. So we can lose one, the internet can still go out through the second one, and that site can keep running while we replace the second firewall. For servers, so servers kind of think like big computers. It's basically storage and compute. So if we are running any of the applications on premise, and that's things like our finance software, our databases, our GIS software, then they sit on our own servers. Our primary data center is here in the administration building. But we also have smaller footprints at each of the 3 long-term care homes. And the reason we do that is because the long-term care homes have applications that need to run on premise, but they also need to run if we have an internet outage or a power outage. So obviously a power outage, the generators kick in and can run those servers, but in an internet outage where you can't get to the outside world, at least those applications can still talk to other assets or other computers or whatever on the network, because everything is local. So as long as they have power, you can still use the software. That is also our biggest, our most expensive capital asset as well, is that server hardware. And so just kind of getting into some of the questions around how we manage this equipment. So our planning for capital replacement on this set of equipment is generally a 5 to 7 year life cycle that we're aiming for. And unlike something like a building, we can't just look at it and say, hey, that asset is in poor condition. I mean, if you look at it in terms of material, it might look fine. Where we tend to have issues is how long that a vendor will actually give us licenses or support on it. So all of this equipment runs software on it called firmware. We license that, we license support, and the vendor also provides updates to how that works, make sure that there's no security vulnerabilities, make sure that it works with the latest management software. And they're only going to do that, just like your iPhone, they're only going to do it for a limited amount of time. So for our core server hardware, for example, we bought that with 5 years of licensing. Originally, the vendor said that's all you're going to get. When that 5 years is up, you're going to have to buy the latest and greatest. And we were able to extend it in the end for another couple of years. But when we're looking ahead at when are we going to replace that server hardware, then again, we're really following what the vendor is telling us they will actually support it or license it for. Similarly with our firewalls, like we really can't be in a place where those firewalls are not supported by the vendor, right? Because it is what is protecting our network. It's one of our primary cybersecurity tools. So if we're not getting the latest updates from the vendor, then we can't be assured that we have the right cybersecurity in place. And similarly, like they are licensing it on a term, and we need to make sure that we can manage it, that we can take updates. So that is usually what's driving the update cycles for those. We have a little more latitude in our access points and our switches. And so as we get a bit closer to when those are going to be replaced, we're assessing, is there something in the latest models that will help us in terms of managing the network? Are there any security vulnerabilities? Are we starting to see issues with the equipment in terms of more common that they're failing or just not connecting or not integrating well with other equipment on the network? When we are estimating the cost, we tend to look for the first 5-year term and even the 10-year term, and we're just initially planning on the 3% or so inflation that we would see year over year. And as we get closer to the replacement dates, then we start discussing with the vendors what those replacement costs are actually going to be. Since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of increases in price that are above and beyond inflation, and that was pretty common in a lot of sectors, but IT seemed to get hit pretty hard. And we've also had a couple of cases where there's been mergers or buyouts, and that licensing component has increased drastically, well above inflation. So we try to catch things like that earlier in the cycle, so we're not just last year trying to scramble and find funds. If we need to correct a few years out, we have that opportunity. And if we're seeing something significant, either in terms of changes in the technology or changes in the financial side of that project, then we take a closer look at competitors and alternative products as well to see if there's something that we should be doing that either makes more sense in terms of running the network or makes more sense from a financial standpoint. For equipment, so again, these are just the things that are not forming the core of the network, but we maintain and they provide some service. So we have 33 printers. I don't need to explain what those are. They are managed by a local company called Excel. So we buy them outright, and they handle all the maintenance. If it's break fix, if it's replacing the toner, things like that, that goes to Excel, and they do a pretty good job at that. They give us some advice for printers in terms of, we kind of tell them what we need in terms of functionality, and then we look at how long we'll think it lasts. Not strictly based on year like some of our other assets, but also the volume of printing that those are doing. Unlike other IT assets, when we see high volume of printers, we will see a shorter life cycle or more problems that need to be repaired. We have 55 UPSs or universal power supplies. So those sit in the IT closets in the server room ahead of our equipment. They provide a bit of battery backup. So if we lose power, everything will stay running while we switch over to the generators. And they also condition the power. So you get power coming into your home or a building, and if you get those little tiny fluctuations that sometimes make the lights flicker, that can be really hard on sensitive IT equipment, especially the servers. And so even when we're looking at the instances where we lose power and we're switching over to generators, we can't have stuff just shut down. That is really, really hard on equipment, and we could just lose it outright in some of those cases. So you need the UPS sitting in front of it to protect it and modulate the power that's coming in. We replace those units every 6 years. We're kind of just looking at industry standard there. It's the battery that tends to fail first. We replace the batteries every 3 years, and then the whole unit on the 6th year. The other two asset classes that I'll mention here, we have meeting room audio visual equipment to do hybrid meetings in 3 of our rooms, so the Bay Room and the Valley Room outside of here. And again, that's just so people can have a mixed in-person virtual meeting, and the room will kind of present as though it's just another attendee in the meeting. We are looking for 10-year lifespan on that. Again, it's going to depend on where the technology goes and how long it stands up. We are kind of new to it over the last few years, so we'll just see how that goes, but hopefully we do get the 10 years. And finally, in Lee Manor and Grey Gables, being older buildings, we manage the air conditioning in our switch closet. So IT equipment can't run too hot. Around 30 degrees, you're getting a cutoff, and if the humidity is in those rooms, it's worse. And so these older buildings weren't built thinking that we're going to run data centers there. So we just put in one of those portable AC units just to make sure the temperatures are within range for the IT equipment, and we're not running any risk of damaging or having that equipment there. Again, we're expecting 10 years out of that equipment. It's probably one of the few cases where it's really easy to tell if something is deteriorating, because obviously if your air conditioning is not making a room cold, then you are going to replace it. Before I get into projects, I will just talk really quickly about the software we're using to track our assets. So we're not using something that's comparable to, say, CityWorks for managing IT capital assets, but for all of those things, we do have management software. So all the FireWares, our server hardware, we can log in and see what the equipment is. We can see it connected to the network. Doesn't tell us too much about, where that sits in terms of is the asset still reliable or that sort of thing, but it does help us manage it in terms of an inventory and making sure it's up to date and has the latest updates. We also have software that we use to manage basic tier support, tier 1 support, or IT service management software, and that pulls in that data as well, so we can keep an inventory. And that does allow us a little bit to see if we're getting recurring problems with a piece of equipment, we're going to have a ticket in that software. And it does allow us a little bit of opportunity to see if there are recurring problems or patterns and something that should be replaced. Although we have a small team and they tend to know if there's something that is causing problems. On the project side, we have 3 big ones that recur in the IT capital budget. There is the corporate website, which is a joint project with communications. That one, we are budgeting for an investment every 4 years. So with the corporate website, and compared to something like the Visit Grey website, which is promotional, you tend to spend a lot of money in the design aspects of a website like that. Visit Grey is more functional. You want people to find information related to the county. You want it to be an intuitive experience. You want it to be set up well. You're spending a little less money on design. So when that 4 years comes around, leading up to it, we're assessing, is the code or the software running that website still current? Do we need to invest in the actual code, or do we need to refresh the content and a bit of the design? And we kind of make that decision leading into the project year. What does the website actually need? I would say based on the dollar value that we're putting into that project, I mean, it's comparable to what we should be doing, or in a sense we often are doing year over year, just in terms of keeping that current. We also have recurring cybersecurity audits. So we pay a company that gives us managed cybersecurity services. So they provide event monitoring on our network. They provide response. The cybersecurity audit is really about having a third party come in and assess whether our cybersecurity program is getting close to a standard, if there's major gaps, if there's things that we should be addressing. In a sense, we're getting some of that from our managed security provider now. So that audit, we could either assess whether that is working, we could do third party assessment, or we could look at smaller parts like network penetration to see if there are vulnerabilities that people could be exploiting to take advantage of our network. There's a plant malicious code in there, or to look more specifically at individual applications and make sure that they're secure as well. Finally, the last project that we have every 5 years is an IT strategy plan. So we've kept those running for the past 15 years, more or less on schedule. Those are really beneficial to IT because we tend to, focus really narrowly on our projects and, rebuilding the network or deploying software. So that level of projects, and every 5 years or so, to have someone kind of come in and help us take a step back and see where trends are going, to make sure we have the right resources to deliver IT services to the corporation tends to be very helpful for us to plan what we're going to do over that 5-year period. So for funding, our funding sources, with everything with one exception, towers, which I'll come back to towers, but everything is essentially levy funded. It's either direct levy funded from the IT budget, or we have the core infrastructure plus UPSs, which go into what we call the interfunctional costs, where we're distributing IT costs back to other departmental budgets. And we do that for two reasons. If you're looking at a budget and you see what the IT costs are, you're getting a rough idea of what it costs to run that department as opposed to just seeing a large IT budget. But we also have some opportunity to reclaim some of those costs through paramedics funding from the province as eligible expenses. So the interfunctional cost goes into that budget and we can claim some back. I'll come back to towers. I'll talk about the towers themselves for a minute. We have two. We have the Woodford Tower, which is 105 meters tall. It was built in 2011. And we have the Ceylon Tower, which is 61 meters tall. Pardon me, and it was built in 2000. So the main use that we have for them is providing VHS for our transportation department, for public works. And now, of course, we have the fire radio communication equipment on those towers. We are also renting space on those towers to the big three telcos so they can provide mobility coverage, and to local internet service providers. So we're getting about, well, last year it was just over 35,000 in rent from the two towers. That goes into reserve so we can eventually replace them, or so we can do the work to extend their lifespan. We are estimating a 50-year lifespan on both towers. In the meantime, the priority for work on those towers is based on recurring inspections. So every 3 years or so, we do a visual inspection where somebody goes on the tower, they look at things like rust or the tension, pardon me, on the guy lines. They look at the equipment that's on the tower, make sure, at least from a visual perspective, that's all in good shape. They'll also look at the safety equipment on the tower, like the cage around the ladder, just to make sure everything is in pretty good shape, especially for the people who are working on the tower, but also for longevity. And then, and slightly longer timelines, we are doing complete engineering studies where they will test all the loading, they will model the weight that's on the tower and the suspension on the guy lines, and just make sure that that's good. So we tend to get a little more information out of the engineering studies in terms of work that needs to be into the tower to support it. But that's where we're getting our information from the towers. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to mention is the end, apparently. The last thing I'm going to mention is the Enhanced Radio Fire Communication project. So as you're all aware, that is a project where 8 of the municipalities are sharing fire radio communications. We have, I guess last year, I took a report to council around establishing a reserve for the eventual replacement of that equipment. So that's early days for us. We have support from the vendor who did the work on that project, and of course, Beyond Sound Police Services provide administration, and they have a lot of expertise around radio communications. So we tend to rely on them a lot for what needs to be done to that system. And our plan is to have a healthy reserve for somewhere around the 12 to 15 year mark. So the vendors have told us that the equipment we're putting in to support radio communications should last 10 years. The vendor who actually deployed it says he rarely sees equipment that's failing at 10 years. We probably have maybe 15 years for some of that equipment. So we just want to make sure that when that time comes, that we do have the reserves available to do the work that needs to be done. We're not likely going out and doing a project the scale of the first deployment. It's probably more piecemeal individual components so that we would need to replace at that time, and we just want to be prepared for it. And that is everything. I hope I didn't miss anything, but certainly open to questions if you have them.
Okay. Just with the Rockwood Terrace project, and will the existing equipment be moved to the new building, or will there be all new equipment go in there? And if so, what does that do to budget plans?
So most of the equipment will be new. So if we're looking at the switches, the wireless access points, or the firewalls, they will all have to be new because we need both sites running at the same time. However, all of that equipment is either end of life or we're pushing it past end of life, so we don't have to invest in the old Rockwood Terrace while we're bringing the new one online. Almost all of the equipment is already covered in the actual Rockwood Terrace rebuild project as well, so we're not sort of double counting or anything like that. And then there may be an opportunity. I would have to defer, I guess, to Randy in that case. We may be moving over printers, but the core network infrastructure that we need those sites operational at the same time. The other thing I will add is that by that time, we shouldn't need to have on-premise server infrastructure in the three homes like we do now. And through the Rockwood Terrace procurement and projects at New Manor and Grey Gables, we expect the applications which do run on premise, which is Nurse Call and WanderGuard. So calling nurses to either the resident rooms or basically the elopement system. Those should come with vendor hardware, so they don't need our servers to run. And they should be set up so they don't need to connect back to the internet to continue running. So we don't expect to have actual server rooms or data centers in the long-term care homes anymore. And then for our own, I mean, this is slightly aside, we are investigating using the cloud-based infrastructure as well. So that should kind of reduce the capital projects that we have in that regard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just kind of touched on my question, which was cloud-based and the server usage and how the transition is working. So we are currently using some cloud-based servers, which is an operational expense because we have a licensing with somebody who operates those, but we are thinking about transitioning some of the data centers, and that's kind of oriented my question in response to ones.
Right, so the big trend we started to see, whereas probably not even 10 years ago, almost all the applications would have run on premise. And that was everything from email, the document management, finance software, HR software. More and more you see vendors selling what's called software as a service. So you're not managing hardware anywhere, so you're just accessing the software. And they are either hosting it in one of the big three providers like Microsoft or Google, or they have their own data centers. Regardless, you hit a web page, you don't really see the difference. We've started to use a little bit of cloud infrastructure. So our backups all go to cloud right now, and we could run from Microsoft Azure in a disaster scenario if we had to. When we first started looking at cloud as a potential alternative to having our own data centers, there's certainly pros and cons as to which way you want to go. But initially it was pretty expensive compared to cloud was expensive compared to on-premise. Unfortunately, cloud hasn't come down, but on-premise has gotten a lot more expensive. And that is almost entirely through licensing. We use a product that was a partnership between a company called VMware and Dell. VMware was the software side. They got bought out, and the licensing increases that municipalities have been hit with are upwards of 300%. So now when we look at it, I mean, it's probably better in terms of reliability, in terms of the workload on IT to be in the cloud, but now they're comparable financially as well, which is why we're giving it a much more serious look.
Just a slight personal question. Whoever is on our Ceylon telecommunications tower is not the same people who run the cell phone. I live right beside it and get terrible service. Just a personal complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jody, just a little bit further to your last response today, and I wanted to ask you to dive a little bit deeper into cybersecurity. I'm sure we have everything possible in place to protect us, but on the very unlikely chance that somebody did get in, what happens? And are you really comfortable with the level of cybersecurity that we have in place now?
Right, so there's two aspects to cybersecurity. So first of all, I don't think there's any IT professional who's ever going to tell you they're comfortable with it. You see what some people have been able to do in terms of hacking into networks, and it is quite terrifying. You would never expect it. Like, there's always stories that surprise you. There are always vulnerabilities that are discovered in software and operating system, hardware. Even the hardware that's meant to protect you can have vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So we seek out a wide range of tools, which council has supported well over the last few years, and we make sure that they're in place, that they're up to date, that people are paying attention to them. And that reduces our risk of getting hacked. No one is ever going to tell you there's no risk, or you spend enough money and you don't have to worry anymore. We just get the risk as low as we can. The other aspect of cybersecurity is making sure that if you are hacked, you can recover quickly from it. And that comes from just making sure we've been doing adequate planning in terms of how we're running the business, if there's an interruption, and what sort of backups and disaster recovery plans that we have in place. So ideally, if we lost our primary data center, we could just stand our backups up somewhere else and start running from that location. We haven't fully tested that, and I don't ever really want to have to. What we're looking at for our server replacement next year will be a fair amount easier to do those sorts of tests. And again, like, you just really want to know that if you have to switch over to that disaster site, that you can. We've certainly been increasing the amount of, I suppose, projects that we're doing for cybersecurity. And we've relied heavily on both our MSSP, our managed managed security service provider, and the prior audits to make sure that we are choosing the most impactful projects when we're asking for something new. And so there's always going to be things where we're coming back either in budget or outside of that, where we're looking to do a little bit more to increase the security. But I think we have done a very well job, a very good job, sorry. And I would definitely commend my team for the work that they've put in for that. They've been that's been focused for quite a few years, and we've made great strides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I might just follow up. We had some training in Meaford last week, and we all learned something that was kind of very important for us. And the modus was, if any of us, perhaps on a weekend, were in our computers and we did something we shouldn't, and we opened something that we shouldn't have, and there we are. And what we learned was that we should simply just turn everything off. Would that be the advice that you would recommend, or what would you suggest, since we're all members of council around this table, if we inadvertently did something we shouldn't, and it's not during, the scheduled work hours, how should we react?
So ultimately, if you are concerned that you've done something on the computer that may be a cybersecurity risk, the IT team is available 24/7. If you're using a council computer, you're probably not on the network. So where you really have to worry is if you had something like an email compromise, where somebody managed to get into your email, then they could try to perpetuate that attack by using your email to send malicious code or phishing scams to other emails. So it very much depends on the situation, but you don't want to just assume that shutting it off would cause an issue to go away. Again, if you think there's reason to have some concern around your cybersecurity, then by all means get in touch with IT.
Thanks for the opportunity. Please bear with me, Jody, because I have to refer back to an old document because my IT's not working here. And actually, we operate under somewhat unique circumstances. So staff here are all operating within, once you're signed in with SharePoint, you're signed in, but I seem to be having conflict between now it wants me to sign back in as my own Sound Municipal, and eScribe is already signed in with the county credentials. So I can't access the 25 budget. So I'm referring off to your 10-year capital from 23 to 32. And you talked about the servers. There is, going back a couple of years, some language about required replacement of server hardware at each of the long-term care homes with redundancy for critical services. This equipment will last for 5 years, beyond which it will likely no longer be supported by the vendor. Given the criticality of the services that run in this hardware, the county will follow a 5-year cycle for replacement in this hardware and ensure that the technology is fully supported by the vendor. New IT hardware will be included in the redevelopment projects. All 3 homes will be scheduled for new hardware again in 2030. The annual contributions to reserve for those initiatives aren't just 1,500. They're pretty good contributions. Could you just speak again further to how that may have changed with the discussion about the cloud-based movement?
So the big changes that will affect the long-term care data centers, or that server hardware, is when we, in particular, the nurse call system and the elopement system, if we can choose products, and I believe we have through the Rockwood redevelopment, that don't require our server hardware, and we don't need server hardware there. The vendor will supply the hardware, or it can be something that runs on the equipment. It may or may not have a cloud hosted piece, but the critical aspect is that if it doesn't have internet, it still works, at least as configured. So yeah, it has been our intention to pull that equipment away and not have to replace the infrastructure. Some of that cost may be offset in terms of what the new applications look like, or whether we need some cloud resources to support it, but ultimately we won't need the data center itself.
So is it starting to fall off the capital projections yet at all as it migrates into operational, or is it still projected kind of remaining at the same contributions while the operational component's going up?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I think I took it out of the capital budget that we presented last fall. I think I would have to confirm that. I did hold on to it for a while. It was in the budget, and it's definitely waiting to confirm that what we wanted to do with that equipment was going to work, that it lined up with projects in long-term care, and that we wouldn't have to replace it before I took it out.
That's usually a question for Mary Lou. Have you got the answer, Mary Lou?
I have the advantage of being able to look it up on my computer and not try to look and talk. So Jody is correct. On the 10-year capital forecast, we don't show any contributions going to reserve for long-term care hardware lifecycle management. We did leave it in the 2025 forecast, but we didn't put any more money in. So there's no projects budgeted, and there's no money coming in or out afterwards. So good memory, Jody.
Good. Okay. Anything else we want to ask Jody? From the chair, I'd just like to, we've had some towers. Obviously, we have the 2 towers that we use. As we continue to move forward, is there a projection that we may need another tower, or is there enough private towers going up that we can get access to? Because I know in West Gray, we've had the company put up 3 towers within the last 8 to 9 months. None of them out east, so Priceville doesn't get anything. Oh, sorry. Yeah, biggest question, do we have enough towers to hold the gear going forward? And or do you think that we maybe need to build another one?
From what I have seen, I don't think we need to build another one. The recommendation from Industry Science and Economic Development Canada is that if you are looking for tower space, that you try to co-locate with an existing tower anyways. And so that's their recommendation. The question really is there enough tower density to support our needs? I think so. I mean, we went through that exercise with modeling paging coverage for the fire communications project before we put any money into actually building the project. And They were able to, I think, hit something like 98% coverage was their original estimate in the county. We've certainly used some of the local companies. We've used Rogers, and in some cases, we've even used just tall buildings to make sure that we have gauging coverage. So as far as our needs are concerned, I don't see the need for another tower. I'm certainly open for, if there's any anecdotal evidence that we do have big gaps that need to be addressed. They may be more at the municipal level with paging, but certainly not for county issues. Probably the biggest gap for the countywide system is just below the escarpment in Blue Mountains, which is relevant for transportation. We also use VHF radios in their trucks. And right now we are on a Telequip tower across Trojan Bay that can fill in that gap for us as well. So not really seeing any.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you for all that update. We've got another one coming up. Have they flipped over there? Kevin, Scott, Kevin? Got Scott coming up?
Well, here, look at this. It says there, item title, you go under there, information technology, planning and paramedic. Then you go down to the attachments and they're all flipped around. How does anybody keep track of things here?
How do I keep a track of anything? Scott, thank you. I'll end up my arguments with Mr. Mackey later. You're on.
Apologize, Mr. Chair, for the poor planning here. So just excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon to the committee here, and thank you for giving me this time to present to you. Just before I get started, I'd like to thank Kara, our financial analyst, Mary Lou, and Randy Schertzer, who all had a hand with this presentation and definitely improved it from what I had originally drafted. I will say in deference to Jody's presentation and the auditors, it's all words. There's no pictures or graphics or charts. It's a planning presentation. So just to jump right into it, the planning department broadly is divided into three budgets. We have our core, what we'll call the land use planning budget. We have the forestry and trails budget, and then we have the agriculture budget. In this case, because we're specifically talking about capital today, agriculture has no capital budget features. So we're going to focus this presentation on both what we'll call the land use planning budget and the forestry and trails budget in that regard. And so we're going to start with the land use planning budget. Broadly speaking, we divide the capital in this budget into four categories: hardware replacement, studies and reports, implementation funding, and our county official plan review, or our new official plan in that regard. With respect to hardware replacement, we don't have a lot in planning, but we do have a large format plotter and scanner, which is just across the hall and in the quadrant here. And similar to Jody's presentation, that piece of equipment has a warranty of 5 years on it. So we tend to run on a 5-year cycle on that, and we budget to replace that every 5 years. It was just replaced in 2024 at a cost of just over $23,000. Certainly, when we get to the end of that 5 years, the equipment isn't always at end of life. So in that case, we actually transfer it over to Grey Roots, and they're able to use it. It is still in workable condition at that point. It's not an artifact or anything else. So we're not throwing away good equipment, if you will. Sort of the next category of capital that we have in our planning budget is studies and reports. And some of these studies that we do are sort of a one-time only thing. So if you think of our natural heritage system study, where we mapped our cores and our linkages, sort of once we have that mapping done, that's done, if you will. There's some implementation, but it's done. And then there's other studies and reports that get renewed on a regular basis. So our growth management strategy, we're currently updating that right now. We had last updated it in 2021 and 2018 before that. So that's one that comes with a regular refresh period, or similarly our development charges background study. And in the case of the development charges background study, that's actually a legislative timeframe in that regard. We don't have a ton of implementation funding and planning, but there are some funds that we've put in the last few budgets to help implement the Housing Action Plan and our age-friendly community strategy. So just for 2025 purposes, we had $30,000 for the Housing Action Plan in this year's budget and $10,000 for the age-friendly community strategy. And then with respect to the county official plan, we are setting aside money each year that will go into a reserve to fund the future update to the county official plan, or in some cases, a new county official plan. That is a fairly significant project. The last number of times we've done that, we've done it in-house. But even doing it in-house, there are still costs associated with respect to the public consultation, some of the document formatting and various other things. So we are planning ahead in that regard and setting that money aside for when we get to that. It used to be that official plan reviews were legislated, that we needed to review them every 5 years. Nowadays, the current legislation says if you have a new official plan, you have to review within 10 years and then 5 years thereafter. So we last updated the official plan we last had a new official plan in 2019. So we're coming up to that period in the next couple of years where we should be looking at a review in that regard. With respect to some of the other capital, when we look at considering new studies, as I said, there's some that we do that are legislated. So if the county wants to continue to have development charges, we need to do a background study. And again, formerly that was 5 years. Now it's every 10 years. Similarly, the county is required under the provincial planning statement to handle growth management for the county and our 9 member municipalities. So that is required. And then other studies are maybe not necessarily 100% required by legislation, but they are recommended. So a great example of that would be the archaeological management plan and the provincial policy statement, and now the provincial planning statement recommend archaeological management plans as a best practice for counties or municipalities in that regard. As I said, some of them are sort of a one and done study, and some get reviewed fairly regularly. With respect to our studies, a number of the studies that we do are significantly funded by development charges. So if we think about a study like our growth management strategy, quite frankly, if we weren't growing, we wouldn't need to do such a study. So a lot of that funds comes from the development charges we collect, versus some other studies that we do are only partially funded by the development charges. And so the archaeological management plan is an example of that type of study. We do have reserves for studies. We have the reserve for the plotter, as I said, that gets replaced every 5 years. And then we have a reserve that where we put money for the official plan update or a new official plan in that regard. Generally speaking, with respect to those studies or major projects like the official plan update, we try to do one major project a year. And so last year we were doing the archaeological management plan. It's bled over a bit into this year, and we're currently working on the growth management strategy update this year. With respect to forestry and trails, we sort of divide this up into 3 categories. The first is major repairs or replacements of culverts and bridge structures on the CP Rail Trail. In this case, we have a set budget each year. It used to be $50,000 every year to handle those repairs and replacements. We've since indexed that to account for the rising costs of materials and labor in that regard. And this budget almost entirely goes to our transportation services bridge crew. So Bob Cherry and his team in transportation services are simply fantastic to work with. Anytime we have an issue on one of the bridges or culverts in that regard, they're out there instantly, and most often they can simply do the work rather than having to go to an outside contractor. There are cases where we're doing a major repair or a full-on replacement that we will have to go to tender, but especially a lot of that year-to-year work is done by Bob and crew. So we're so thankful for the relationship with transportation services in that regard. Over the past couple of years, we've also had an annual capital budget of $25,000 for surveying portions of the CP Rail Trail, and this is to bring some of those remaining portions into the land registry system that weren't reflected there in the past. Well, I should have mentioned back on the bridges and culverts. We also partner with Transportation Service on hiring a contractor for those bridge and culvert assessments that get done every so many years. Our next one for the CP Rail Trail is planned in 2026. So the same person that's assessing the structures on our county roads is also hired to assess the structures on our CP Rail Trail as well. And then finally, we've had a line item for a number of years with respect to new infrastructure upgrades, and usually what this entails is a major refresh or a new parking lot along either the CP Rail Trail or the county forest, but more on that on the next slide. With respect to those parking lot projects, we have built a few of them over the past few years. We've put a pause on them more recently based on the costs that come about to maintain these parking lots, and more specifically, the winter maintenance and snow clearing costs is quite dear. We had a 10-year capital plan in place whereby we had looked at following the recommendations of the Recreational Trails Master Plan, where we needed more parking in some of our county forests and where it would be advantageous to have parking along the CP Rail Trail. And we planned that out such that they were generally trying to be done in tandem with a nearby roads construction project, such that if they had surplus materials or equipment that they were using on the roads, that they could easily just scoot over and help us with a parking lot. So when we did the Collapore parking lot in Grey Road 2, or when we did the CP Rail Trail parking lot at Rockford on Grey Road 18, we got significant cost savings by, again, partnering with our friends in transportation services. But as I said, the last couple of years, we have put that sort of 10-year capital plan on hold, given the costs of maintenance. And council may recall that they directed staff to look at paid parking or options for parking in that regard. So we will have a report coming in hopefully about a month to committee of the whole on that to see whether or not there's a system by which we can better fund those. And then with respect to reserves, we do try to maintain a healthy reserve as much as we inspect our structures and have regular maintenance and monitoring of things like the CB Rail Trail. There are always those unexpected major events that can lead to repairs. So with respect to reserves, we had 114,000 approximately in 2025 and forecasted at 116,000 in 2026. Well, this sounds like a large number. Certainly, if you get into a large structure repair, that money can be eaten up fairly quickly. But we try to manage as best we can to plan ahead such we don't have those unexpected events. And so, in a nutshell, that's high level what we're looking at in terms of the forestry and trails capital, as well as our land use planning capital. But certainly, be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Quickly, anybody? Really? We've continuous with our forest and for a number of years invasive species in our county forests. Is that as big a problem going forward, and do we have enough money in there if it is still a big problem? All you have to do is go down Highway 6 and take a look at the wild chervil. But most of that's in Meaford. Hasn't even got to Chatsworth yet, right? It's all over. I guess, you know, in forestry and trails, are we looking at any of that or not?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for that. We are certainly looking at it, and we're working with Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, who is contracted to do a lot of the work in our forests and trails, and we're also working with Mark Cronin, the county's weed inspector, in that regard. It is a growing issue, and it's one of those, you know, I don't want to call it a whack-a-mole, but you know, just when you think you might be getting a handle on one invasive species or one challenge, you have another threat present itself. So, you know, council will be aware that through one-time funding and through the operating budget, we have been battling invasive buckthorn in the past few years. What we're being told from other municipalities, from our experts at Grace Harbor, is that that's just going to have to be an ongoing thing. And simply put, if we don't, it could significantly choke out major sections of our forest in that regard. No doubt that's not the only invasive we're dealing with. We've got different ones along sections of the CP Rail Trail that we are spraying for. We've got others that are popping up in the county forests. We're trying to manage that in an operational sense. We've asked Grace Harbor, you know, is anyone got any widespread strategies here, and they pointed us to different municipalities across the province and some conservation authorities that are doing it. But it's a huge issue, and the number that we keep hearing out of the town of Oakville was they were spending $1 million a year just on buckthorn, and that's largely within a relatively urban environment. So if you picture the expanse of the county in terms of our forests and the CP Rail Trail, I don't like saying this in front of council, but there's no end of money you could invest in it. But what do we reasonably have the resources for, and what do we think will make an impact? And in transportation and such, we've been dealing with turbo for a number of years, and private landowners have too. So we're trying to stay on top of the science and the latest research in that regard. But it is a challenge. We don't have significant reserves for those purposes. We've been dealing with it out of one-time funding or operating in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Well, if there's no other questions, looks like you're going to capital and everything. You're coming on at least a minus 5% budget for going forward. I'm not going to turn your mic on. You don't need to answer that one. Thanks, Scott. Mr. McNabb. Kevin. And you're just going to tell us that ambulances are going up in price by 20% a year and
I don't have good news for you for that. 67% over the last 5 years. Probably not a good way to start the presentation. Okay. Yeah. I don't like it either, so we're on the same boat. Okay, good afternoon, council. A pleasure to be here today to talk about the 10-year capital. So it'll be broken down into equipment and vehicles and our infrastructure. Talk about the comprehensive deployment review, and then our VCA building condition assessments, and Garrett's going to speak about financial planning and other funding sources. And just saying that, thank you to Garrett and Laura and Mary Lou and the team and Randy for everybody reviewing this and help put this together. Hopefully gives you a good picture of what we're working on in paramedic services capital. So ambulances, currently we have 17 in the fleet that are up and running. We just received the 2 ambulances for 2025, which were ordered probably 18 to 24 months ago. So that will get us to 19 ambulances in our fleet. The way that works is we have 12 frontline, which that'll be starting this weekend with the additional 12-hour car, and it gives us 7 spares. The spares are available for change of shift, getting people off and get vehicles started. It also gives us capacity for breakdowns and when we've been in times when we need repairs. The ambulances are typically on a 6-year replacement cycle, but we do have ones right now that are 7 and 8 years old, and that you can see that in our operational lines when they start to get that old, the significant repairs. And that's one of the reasons why our operational lines have been over the last couple of years, because of the repairs they have. Typically, we're getting rid of these ambulances at 275,000 to 350,000 kilometers. But we do have units right now are around 450. Currently, there's 7 outstanding ambulances, 2 more this fall or December we hope to get, and then there will be another 5 early in 2026. Again, we're ordering 18 to 24 months ahead. We do have 1 ambulance in the budget for this year to order, and it is welcome. There is another vendor available, TriStar. I have sent them a picture of our ambulance to see if they can meet the same design as what we have today. I haven't heard back yet. And there also is potentially another vendor coming online. So it'd be interesting to see, like, because they're so far out, we're getting all these other vehicles in. We're not rushing into that, but we hope to come to a plan and back to council for approval about what that would be, what that look like. The other thing to look at is remounts have been coming back in. We tried a refurbishment, I would say, actually it was both first when the county assumed the service around 2004, and it didn't go very well. Like there's a lot of repairs, and I think we actually even ended up getting rid of it early. Remounts are a bit different. They use more of the shell. But there hasn't been a lot of experience with it yet. And because the vehicles we're getting rid of right now are already 7, 8 years old, probably better to get back to our 6-year and start using it, because we would be having those shells for 12 years if we repeated them. But it is something that we're looking at as a potential for some cost savings. The power load units that go into these vehicles, and we'll show a picture here in a second, we use those for 2 cycles. We try to get the most out of that as the best we can. So they are used for 2 cycles. That's the mechanism that loads the stretcher in and out, and be able to, so there's no lifting in and out of the ambulance. And again, like I said earlier, these ambulances have increased by 67% over the last 5 years, which is significant increases. So that's a picture of our ambulance. I'm sure most people have seen them. But it's a standard design by Demers, a Type 3 ambulance. It's a cutaway van with an aluminum box on the back. But it is an integrated system. You can see the power load is installed in the vehicle. Now they come power load ready. We purchase the power load separately if we're not reusing it, and the stretcher attaches to it. Significant safety advantage to this. It used to only be a 10G in one direction, but now it's 25 Gs in all directions, which is really good. So you don't see the stretcher breaking away if you're in an accident. It's held in there in all directions. Significant reduction in injury and paramedics as far as loading that vehicle in and out. There's no more lifting. And again, that's been definitely seen as far as injuries between power stretchers and power load, significant advancements there. So as far as emergency response vehicles, we have 9 in the fleet. The way it works is we have 4, you see them out there, trucks, more or less with a space cap on the back. 2 of them are replaced every 5 years, but then we keep it the other 2 that for another 5 years. So technically they're in the system for 10 years. Usually by the time they come off of the front line, they have 300,000 kilometers on them. And then over the next 5 years, they'll get another 100,000. We use them for backup when the vehicles are in for spare, if they're broken down. We also use them for our managers. Like we don't have any cars for our managers, but we do, or myself, we just use these backup vehicles if we have to go somewhere or travel throughout the county. And then we have our first response vehicles and our CP vehicles, which we typically use an Explorer for that, or we do use an Explorer, smaller configuration. And so they're stocked like a first response vehicle. So they are able to respond to emergencies in the majority of cases when paramedics are on the road. There's some due to working arrangements where they don't respond, but most of our paramedics do respond in a primary care paramedic capacity when they're out there. The life expectancy of those differs slightly. For a first response unit, I believe it's 6 years, and then our CP vehicles are 7-year replacement. It's mostly based upon kilometers. So the capital replacement allows for 2 new supervisors in 2029, once first response unit in 2028. Now in our budget in 2027, the Thornbury car, which will be an upstaff of the first response car. So we'll only be adding 1 full-time body for that. If that is approved in the budget to add that extra car that year, we will not purchase that first response unit. That'll not be purchased because we won't need it. It'll be part of the ambulance fleet at that time. And then, we'll know this year about CP if it continues to move forward as far as funding goes. So there will be another vehicle to purchase in 2026, and then the 3 vehicles in 2029. Again, we'll hear hopefully more later this year about CP beyond March 31st, 2026. And our incident response trailer, we've had that now almost 15 years, actually 15 years this year. And we're getting 20 out of it. I think it's pretty good value. We only paid $37,000 for it in 2010. And it's been a really good addition to our fleet when we need it, especially in special events or emergencies. So we don't use it a lot, but it's nice to have them when we need it. So it just gives you an idea of our supervisor truck. This year, we actually tried saving more money, and we reused the cap with this year's version. It didn't go too bad. It was like unexpected costs, like because of the age of the fiberglass, we had to have one painted to get the decals to stick. and the locks and stuff like that were some bit troublesome. But anyways, we made it work, so we actually are getting 2 cycles out of the caps too, which this also helps save on some costs. Power stretchers, this is where the stretcher lifts the patient, can lift up to 700 pounds. You can imagine, stretcher weighs 100 pounds and the equipment and a patient that weighs 150 or 250 pounds, like doesn't take long to get 300 to 400 pounds. And you can reduce that lifting on a paramedic, multiple times a day. It reduces injuries, and we've seen significant reduction of injuries now as far as lifting patients. We get injuries before about lifting stretchers or lifting them out of the ambulance. It really doesn't happen anymore because of the equipment that we have in place. So these power stretchers run on hydraulics. We have 19 front line and then 3 spare stretchers in the system. Stryker warranties these stretchers for 7 years. We keep them for 10. I can't say enough, whether it's vehicles or stretchers or oxygen equipment, suction. I think we got the best maintenance staff in the province. They take such good care of it. They're very, very well trained in our specialty equipment. When we take a vehicle out for service, they don't just service the vehicle, but they service and maintain quality of all our lifting equipment, again, our specialized equipment. And that allows us to keep it for these extended periods of time. And so an additional 4 stretchers will be purchased over the next 10 years. New stretchers to be added in 2025, which we've already added, and we've already ordered the ones for this year. They went out to tender, and you can see the numbers there as we replace them over the next years. And with budget approval in 2027, we add the 2 12-hour shifts if we move forward with that. And then there'll be 1 spare car added at that point to get us to 22 ambulances. There'll be another 3 stretchers in 2027 as a new purchase. Cardiac monitor defibrillators, it's more than just a defibrillator. It's one of the tools we use pretty much in every call. So it measures your heart rhythm, it measures your heart rate, it identifies whether somebody's having an acute heart attack. We use it for blood pressure assessment, oxygen saturation. It measures if you have any carbon monoxide in your blood from a poisoning. It also measures airway, make sure we have the right airway placement. So we measure the end-tidal CO2, which can go to your lungs. So it's a tool we use on a fairly regular basis. We just received the 2 for this year, so our current fleet is 27. And then again, in the next 4 years, with budget approval, we'll be adding additional 3 more units. We keep these units for a 7-year replacement cycle. So we use them. Some places are anywhere 5 to 7, but we keep them for 7 years. And we do have a lifetime warranty on them, so they do all the quality checks, and then short of the SPO2 cables, everything else is warranted with the warranty that we purchased, which is really good. So this just gives you an idea of what it looks like. The stretcher is really more or less our workbench. Patient goes on there, and we have the cardiac monitor. Everything's pull tested that's on there. The defibrillator's pull tested 10 Gs. And again, that's more or less where we do our work, and the cardiac monitor defibrillator is a big piece of that equipment. Mechanical CPR devices. In 2023, they changed the standard around length of time for CPR, and they've increased the duration before there's any move towards a termination or resuscitation. They went from somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes to a 20-minute CPR in certain circumstances. So thank you to council for the support for this equipment. It's very well used. Crews use it a significant amount of time. We have a 10-year useful life on these devices. Currently, we have 19 units in the system, and we will be adding 5 over the next 4 years. So be 22 for the ambulances, and then for our first response units and supervisor trucks to be available. So that just gives you an idea of the device. And for the people that saw it, you can see we showed it here at council. Stair chairs, we use a track stair chair similar to what you would see with a fridge cart. So if you have a patient going downstairs, the tracks actually click out of the back, and then you're able to roll people down the stairs, which is a lot safer for the patient and a lot safer for the paramedics. So there's one of these stair chairs per truck. We do keep a spare at each depot, and we also keep one at for special events, especially at the attack and stuff like that, to move people in other areas if we need them outside of an ambulance. So for those, again, we keep those for 10 years, Stryker warranties are for 7, but they are well maintained by our depots. We do have a significant replacement in 14 of them in 2026 and 3 in 2029. Again, we used to, at one time, be able to buy them all at once and replace them all at once, but as we've been adding numbers as we go and vehicles to our fleet, we don't purchase them all at one time. But the 2 have been ordered, actually, we haven't received them yet, but they'll probably be here in the next 4 to 6 weeks for 2025. So it's a picture of a stair chair. The track's actually folded up from the back, folds up and stored inside the ambulance. We don't keep these on our first response vehicles and only stored in our ambulances. AVL and GPS. So we have to have GPS on our ambulances to be monitored by dispatch. They are able to use a computer aided dispatch system that picks the closest unit to the call and assigns the call. So having that GPS available, and then the AVL, where we can actually monitor the system, is provided by ASTEC. These units we typically keep for the life of the unit, so 6 years for ambulances and 5 years for supervisor truck, and 7, I think, for the first response units. But so if you look at that, we have a significant purchase in 24, replacement of these. In 2025, we have 2 for our new ambulance. And again, if the new ambulance is available, or if the new ambulances are approved in 27, we'll have 3 new ones to add to the fleet then. With our purchase of iPads, we'll talk about that in a second. We used to have Wi-Fi in the trucks, and that was probably somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 to have that box available. But now that we went with the iPads, so we'll talk about that more with the iPads. But we've had significant savings, so we're not having to purchase those now, because the iPads, they just use our cards, so we don't need these units anymore. So that gives you an idea of the AVL program that we're able to monitor our fleet at any given time, where the vehicles are, speeds, distances. If there's questions or investigations about response times, we can see what route they took and how fast they went, and so it's good to have that available to us. So iPads, this is we moved forward this year with the new software program for our electronic medical record. It's moved away from a Windows platform to a iOS platform, which allowed us to move to iPads. Before, we'd pay probably close to $6,000 for a tough book computer that probably wasn't so tough. It broke down a lot, caused us a lot of problems. And even the docks that we used to dock them, they were probably close to $2,000, and it didn't take much to damage them. iPads have really offered a significant savings moving to this, even though we had to buy a number of them. But we don't have to buy docks anymore and mounts and stuff. Well, we have to buy a mount, but it's significantly cheaper. And as far as the connection point now, because everything's wireless, all we have is charging cords to deal with them. That could be troublesome too, but definitely not to the same expense. Before, if you damaged the keyboard, it'd be $700. So it just we don't seem to have those problems anymore, which is good. So in the system right now, we use one in the front of the truck, and then we have one in the back. The one in the front is locked in. They use that for call details from the computer aided dispatch system, using the directions and the details of what's happening on the call. That stays in the truck. And then we have one that's mounted in the back, and the place the mechanics have developed for us that we can charge it. And that's where they do all their documenting. So they take that and document it. We do keep one spare at each base for change of shift, because when you show up at the base, you got to be able to finish your call. So that if the other truck needs to leave, then they have another one that they can start their shift with and then get going. And the truck that needs to finish their documentation can do that at the end of their shift. And again, we talked about air cards there, that there's been a savings there, that we don't have to buy these Wi-Fi units anymore. So Jody's got us a great deal on the internet now, Rogers. It's really good. And that's just a picture of what it looks like in the front of the truck. You can see fairly basic design of a mount in the front, and just a charging board. But that's a picture of our CAD-Link program. Uses a Waze mapping, and it connects to our CAD program at dispatch. One thing with using Waze, it allows us to also bring in all our road closures to Transnomus, which is really good. So you see it live, which is really good. These enhancements around equipment is like, there's always been the replacement schedule, with the enhancements and adding has been a recommendation through the comprehensive deployment review, which was done in 2022. And then we implemented through 2023, and then really the first staffing increases started in 2024. Gives us a roadmap for, to cover our growing demand of calls. ORH predicted a 5.8% increase average per year over the next 10 years. We look at the last 5 years going back, and right now it's 5.9, based upon our last report. And then when I look at this year's, just within the last 3 weeks, we're probably sitting just over 8% increase this year so far. And usually we see most of our call increases starting now until the end of the year. So I'm not sure which way it'll go. It might go down, might go up, but as of right now, we're sitting over 8%. So new additions we integrate into the capital plan, and Garrett and Laura are able to work that. There's always a lot of moving parts in that to develop that plan. And again, to fund this, we're borrowing against our equipment reserves to purchase these. The cost of that enhancement plan for bases, vehicles, and staffing, and the whole entire requirement of that plan is $410,000 yearly to the net levy. So this chart just gives you an idea of as of the end of year of 2024 and then 2025 enhancements. So you can see there's enhancements in 2025, and then a budget approval 2027 for 3 more vehicles. And you'll see at the end of well, more or less after 2027, we'll have 22 ambulances. We did cut that back when we did the original comprehensive deployment review. We cut back at least 1 or 2 spares, and then also reduced about one truck in 5 days. And then 9 ERVs, 24 power stretchers, would be 30 defibs, 24 mechanical CPR, 24 stair chairs, 31 ABL GPS units, and 70 iPads. The iPads, I hope we're able to get at least 5 years out of. Maybe, like, I hope we can. By the sounds of things in Quebec, they've been able to do that, and so that's what our computers were as well. So these are our bases. So we own 3 of them currently, and hopefully September we'll own 4. Durham hopefully will be open, and then we're also moving forward with Feversham will be 5. And then we lease spaces right now in Markdale, Meaford, Dundalk, Durham, and Hanover. So the comprehensive deployment review, in that we have the base rebuild in Durham again, and hopefully that's open after Labor Day weekend in September. That houses our logistics and supervisor admin space, but also area for a crew in that location. And then there'll be 4 new base locations, again, pending budget approval. Feversham, we're working on that right now for 2025, and then Eaton in 2026, Thornbury in 2027, and Pebble Beach in 2028. One thing that we are working on is Dundalk. That this is something that developed earlier this year, that they require space for their fire department. So they've asked us to look at other options to move. So we have looked at the depot down there as potential remodel, and also potential for a rebuild. We're actually just working on those assessments right now. It'll be interesting to see once we get the tender out to what the bases are going to require, or what they're going to cost. That we'll be able to get them in under budget. Like we have, I think in the budget 1.6, but hopefully we can get some savings. I think that we'll see some savings in Durham as well. So hopefully that'll help offset some of these extra costs in Dundalk. We'll be coming back with a plan with that. So the comprehensive deployment review, they looked at the call volume up until 2022. They went back 5 years, and then because of COVID and some of the things that we're seeing around call volume, we weren't sure how solid it was as far as increases. They went back 5, so they looked at 10 years. This year will be the 4th year of the data, and with us adding 2 cars in 24 and then adding the one in 25, we're not adding any resources in 26. So what I hope to do is with the operational budget for 2026 is to come back to council for approval through the budget process to do like a mini review to see where we're at with call volumes, and then help that this guide the decisions for the next 4 to 5 years, 6 years to finish off that review. we look at it ourselves going forward. But I think just, ensuring that we are on the right track, with approval, that'd be something be good to look at. The idea would be as we get approval, that we would complete it in spring of 2026. And then from there, bring it to council summer of 2026. So we can have the information as far as a go forward into the years. Like the next years, that's when we're adding 2 12-hour trucks in 2027. Building condition assessments, we'd use that to plan for existing infrastructure that we own, to ensure that we keep them up to date and keep anything that needs replaced fixed before it becomes a major repair. Right now, Durham and Feversham aren't a part of that, but the other own bases are, so we will work those into the BCA planning in the near future. For Owen Sound this year, we are getting the flooring done. It is time. It's 20 years to get that vinyl composite flooring replaced. And we did take to the budget this year about roof replacement based upon guidance that we're getting. But we're not sure about that right now. We actually may look for another opinion about the results of that haven't been as positive as I've heard. So we're actually going to take another look at that roof if we're going to do any of that work to extend the life. The parking lot in Owen Sound is due in 2026, but I'm pretty sure that parking lot's in pretty good shape. Hopefully they'll be able to push that out further. Again, we don't just replace it because it's the time, but we can look at the stuff and push it out. So I'm not a parking lot expert, but I'm sure Pat will only some people that know what they're doing. And but I'm pretty sure we're in pretty good stead for it. But again, we will look at that. And carbon monoxide detectors, I would think that would be timely there that we would replace those in Gregory. That's my portion, but I guess I'd take questions when we're all done once scared done. That work for I can take them now.
Thank you. No, let's go with Garrett and then, yeah, if there is any, we'll get you back up there, Kev. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So when we're planning with this 10-year capital plan, we use a 3.5% inflationary rate when we're going past the current year. And this is based on the historical inflationary trend we're used to. This obviously, if you look at the last 5 years, that isn't as accurate of a number, but that's where we're kind of hoping things will stabilize. These pieces of medical equipment and specialized equipment, there's not a lot of vendors out there. And they've seen a lot higher inflation than maybe other departments have. But when we're looking at it in the short term, we do review and adjust for any quoted prices we've received, or we talk to counterparts to see what pricing they're seeing if they bought the equipment recently. And then, like Kevin said, we also do qualitative assessments on all the assets. If we can get a few more years out of anything, we do. We don't just replace it because it's due to be replaced that year. And then obviously we look at how everything's impacting our reserve balances. Then in the long term, we do consider our supply chain delays. Currently with ambulances, as Kevin mentioned, we're seeing anywhere from 18 to 24 months. So we bring reports a year early asking to order the ambulances in hopes that they'll come the next year. The main vendor for ambulances has said that these lead times are supposed to be coming down, but we haven't quite seen that yet, but fingers crossed. The other thing we're considering is debt servicing for debentures. Currently we have a debenture for the Chatsworth base. And then in the 10-year capital plan, there's debentures for all the additional bases that are coming along with the enhancement plan. And then lastly, we look at how everything overlays with the asset management plan. So here's a forecast of our equipment reserve balance over the next 10 years. You'll see that it does dip below zero starting this year. And this is because of the enhancement plan. As Kevin mentioned, for the plan to work, we had to borrow against our existing reserves. Typically, if you're replacing an ambulance or you buy a new ambulance and you think it's going to cost you $300,000 6 years from now, you will put away $50,000 each year to reserve so that at year 3 you have $30,000 or $300,000 sitting in that reserve. Because we added all these assets and added all these staffing resources early, the reserve doesn't really have time to catch up until later in the plan. The other thing I want to mention is you'll see in 2034, currently we're planning to have $3 million or over $3 million in this reserve. When I first started here, we had 15 ambulances and they were on every year you would either get 2 or 3. So the reserve did stay pretty consistent. With the enhancement plan and the supply chain issues, now there's some years where we're going to get 8 ambulances in 1 year. So this reserve will spike and drop pretty drastically. But after that, after it breaks past 0 closer to the end of the enhancement plan, the plan is for it always to stay above 0. But you can't see 2035 on this chart, but it will drop significantly after that. Next is just the BCA reserve balance. Again, like Kevin said, it's funded by an annual contribution. So these are just the draws when stuff is due to be replaced per the BCAs, but that's evaluated annually. And all of paramedics' 10-year capital is funded through a combination of levy. The bases are funded through debentures, which later then get funded by levy, our own departmental reserves, development charges through the land ambulance reserve, and proceeds from the sales of old capital assets. There's also indirect grant funding. The ministry does cover 50% of our amortization expense. So it doesn't provide upfront funding for any of the assets, but it does pay for 50% of the asset over the life of the asset as we recognize the amortization expense. Up for questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question regarding, Kevin, you were mentioning the length and time we're keeping in ambulances and the extra maintenance required. The maintenance required for them, is it predominantly just your mechanical on the vehicle itself, or our own mechanic services that we have on staff are able to do it? Or is the maintenance lending into some of the components within the ambulance itself, like your storage, your stores, your catches, latches, things like that, that the actual ambulance itself is starting to break down with the usage from the paramedics?
I would say the majority is mechanical as far as the chassis itself. So we're seeing like transmission replacements and like significant stuff like that. That's taking up most of the cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Kevin. The call volume, you spoke to the increases in call volume. Are you able to pinpoint, or I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for the call volume increases. I guess my question is, at what point, how long can we continue to have this increase in call volume before we're going to drastically have to increase our number of personnel and ambulances? I know we have a plan to increase somewhat, but if we continue to increase at 8% a year, when will it start to affect our response times in dealing with the public?
The plan that ORH built for us for 10 years is to carry us out 10 years, like predicting those call volumes to the best that they can. I think that like we've averaged 5.9, but then we see like 1.1, and then we'll see an 8. Because we see an 8 doesn't mean next year is going to be an 8. It could be a 3. So I think that variability, you know, I think that they've been pretty true of the 5.8, and here we are at 5.9. If you go back to the last 10 years, it was around 4.5 to 5. So it's probably been around that 5% per year. But the plan that they put in place, it is based upon modeling and call volumes. I'm pretty confident that with the plan they have in place and what we have today, we will meet those needs. If we start seeing 8 to 10% every year over year, then that would be something we definitely want to look at. But having that ability of that modeling tool, we can run that now. ORH has our data, we have the ability ourselves. We are getting some savings, like the modeling tool. It's fairly complex to use, and we're not using it a lot. So we didn't pay 10,000 this year, and I hope to not to pay 10,000 next year. That if we need a report for $1,000, like for what we need, we can get them to run it. And so until we get back at it, but we always have that available to us, that if we see significant call volumes, we can run that modeling and we can figure out what resources we need to meet that demand. I'm hopeful that it'll maintain that really average of 5.8. Again, like because we have an 8 this year, doesn't mean next year we an 8, it can be a 4. But we don't know till we don't know it all. No, and that's a contributor, like we are in that, called the silver tsunami. Like, people are getting older and, we have this aging population. We'll probably be in that for the next 10 to 15 years.
Anything else? Yep, go ahead, Scott.
2 questions. First one's more of a point. I just learned how expensive carbon monoxide detectors can be. I'm not sure if you can just expand on this is on the $5,000 carbon monoxide detector for the base. Secondly, I think if we went around the table, we would all agree that the trailer is a nice to have unit. But I'd like to know more about the utilization of it and the incident response nature of it, because frankly, the paramedics are the last to stick around. They are on their way transporting, individuals, and it's the fire and police that remain at a scene. With the increase in resources since that trailer was bought, there's substantially more resources for paramedic services across the county to respond to a larger incident. So even if it's $37,000 or $40,000, I'd be interested in knowing more about what precipitates the need there, as opposed to, okay, we tried it 15 years ago, added something to the fleet, nice to have, but if it's just for community barbecues and so forth, is it the type of piece of equipment that we have to evaluate closely in terms of determining that it's not a requirement to the provision of the services?
So the carbon monoxide detector is a system that's installed like with varying throughout the garage for levels. So I honestly, that would be the consultant that price that out, but it is a system that is in place. And I believe in Craig Leak that actually measures nitrogen dioxide. I think that's the off gas of diesel. So that would be probably a bit more for that one. That's in Craig Leak. Going forward, because our diesel units are out, I don't know if it will be cheaper or not. I'm not sure, because we're really only dealing with carbon monoxide. But I think it's because it's not just when you plug into your wall, it's part of the system of the building. The trailer itself, we don't never used it for a barbecue, but we do use it for special events. We use it when we do our high angle rope training and stuff like that. But we also use it for events. Like if you look at when we were at the rooming house in Hanover, it was part of almost a month. We use it at significant events like a fire. Yeah, like it's not that it rolls every day, but when you need it. If we go to Blue Mountain for special event coverage, like where we have the ski cross, where we could be there for 3 days, we use it there. It's a place to go where we have radio communications, place out of the weather, we have extra equipment. Could you get away without it? You can get away with anything, I guess, get away without it, but when you need it, you mean, man, I wish I had it. Like that would be the thing. And we have used it even with fire services and police services. Now, some of them are starting to get more of their own. And again, I'm not one for duplicating something, because if everybody had one and we had a community one that we could use, even better. Like we can roll it out, but that would take some planning to make sure. And it is having a place to go in the weather when you're out on the side of the road or out in the field. It means a lot to have a place to go that's warm and dry or cool. Like we've done a firefighter rehydration with that trailer. There's been lots of things happen inside that.
Anyone else? And this might be more for Mary Lou or Sue. One of the interesting points that you made there was that, the parking lot at the Owen Sound Station. Yeah. Asset management, yep, it's got a 10-year life on it. We can probably extend it. How often do we update that? Always been a little, I'll preface this, it's always been a bit of a bugaboo for me that, the provinces, we got to do asset management plans. No, and here we've got it in, it's 10 years and, no, it's another 15 years. Or another 5 years. Sorry, it's extended out to 15. I guess my concern is how much faith do we put into these asset management plans on trying to project over that long the amount of time that we put into them and continue on with them? Do we update them on an annual basis and keep extending them out? Or how good are they? Mary Lou, you want to jump on?
I'll give it a stab and keep in mind it's 4 o'clock and we were supposed to be done at 4 o'clock. So an asset management plan is a living document. And so it's doing the right thing to the right asset at the right time. And it all depends. So you do build a condition assessment, somebody evaluates the parking lot. They have standard replacement life cycles. But then you take that and you apply it to what you actually see yourself and say, if that was my own, would I replace it today or do I think it's got a few more years? And you've been here long enough, you remember back in the day when the parking lot here was supposed to be replaced. And it didn't happen until we did the addition on the building. So we just kept deferring it. It's no different than in long-term care. I can go to Rockwood Terrace and say, oh, we were going to replace a washer and dryer. It's 7 years we're up, but it was still working fine and Karen would defer it. So that's the way you apply any of this. We try to use the same logic as you would use on your own personal house. That, the asphalt shingles are starting to curl. That's not good. You want to protect the integrity of a building. You do the right thing. And you try to make sure that you have the right amount of money for when you need to do something, because there's a former church in town that doesn't exist anymore because they didn't do enough at the right time. And then the volume of repairs became insurmountable and they couldn't afford it. So that's my short abbreviated answer. I could talk about that all day. I love asset management.
Thank you for the answers, and it's very subjective. There's nothing objective in asset management. I'll take that one. Okay. Any other questions for Kevin? We're not needing a helicopter, so we're okay there. One of the interesting ones, and it's come up at working with, and you were the one that, you did say that, and Councillor Gregg has said it as well too, with the police and fire, how integrated we are. By saying that, how much it puts a fairly large strain on our volunteer fire departments of response. And with all of the new equipment, is there a requirement going to be continue to respond? That we'll need more of these stretchers to lift and whatnot and take an ease off of our fire departments? Has that been factored in on budgeting going forward?
With the mechanical stretchers and hydraulics and automated CPR devices and stuff like that, it significantly helps. But there are times where these devices, like you're coming out of a staircase, down a staircase, trying to do different things, trying to carry the patient and treat them at the same time. Working a cardiac arrest with 2 people can be done, but it's not optimal and probably not gives the best chance for people. So we have looked at our tiered response agreements for the majority of the fire departments, and we had them respond to what we call obvious immediate threats. So choking, cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, car accidents, industrial accidents, electrocutions, safety in mind, and where there's extrication involved. So we try to reduce those numbers as best we can and only have them involved when they're, going to be able to make a difference. They're not rolling to every shortness of breath call the majority of the time or every chest pain call. That's handled with the paramedics like you see in the cities where they go to a lot of these calls, they call code 4 calls, life threatening. Like, can it be done without tier response? They can be, and we have done it without that, but it's not ideal. And our partners really do help us between the police and the fire department. They do make a difference on those days. And we talk about sharing capital. We see some municipalities like paramedic services buying like an all-terrain vehicle or a back road off-road vehicle, but man, we got 3 of them here in the county at least, and one phone call will have what we need. You know, some services have a drone. I can get 2 drones tomorrow if we need it, you know, just that same cooperation and sharing. Like, we try not to buy things we don't need if it's already somewhere else.
Excellent. Love partnerships. Any other questions for Kev? Then we'll move on. Thank you very much, sir. Must be 5 o'clock somewhere. Mary Lou wants to get out of here really quick. We're down to 4B. Then that's it for, I think, unless you've got more for us on this capital budget. B? Yes. Development charges. Well, there's B, C, and D. Yep. But we've got to get to B. That's the one we want to get to. This one's yours. Go.
So this is I have 3 reports now. All of them are legislative requirements to come back to council annually to report on them. They're all incredibly number heavy, but the content and the narrative within them is similar most years. We're just updating the numbers and keeping everyone aware. So I'm gonna not breeze through them, but kind of just hit the very high level. And if there's any questions, then I'm happy to take them. So the first is the 2024 Development Charges Reserve Fund Statement. And really just the key takeaways here are that we have $25.9 million in development charges at the end of the year. This is an increase of $1.1 million compared to last year. And the 2025 budget is planning to use $11.9 million of these DCs on capital projects. And then the other one thing I would highlight is just the table 2 that outlines the development charges collected by unit, which shows where our DCs are actually coming from as far as what type of buildings. And then there's also a few really good attachments that provide great information on where they're coming from as far as what lower tier versus interest income, and then where we've spent our DCs over the last 5 years. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Anyone? Scott, Mr. Mack?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Garrett, can you just refresh my memory as far as capital asset replacement? There's a time frame, right? Like the asset has to be a longer life asset. Can you just tell us how we're incorporating? Is it 7 years that an asset has to be within a 7-year replacement before we can use development charges?
I don't know that threshold off the top of my head. As Scott mentioned, we use DCs for studies. The Development Charge Act is prescriptive in what can and cannot be used for a DC. And that's why we do a DC study every 5 years that goes out and looks at what's on the horizon for work and what's related to growth. And then a percentage is assigned to that project, and that is the percent that you're allowed to use DCs from. So I don't know if it's specific. It's not just that it has to be per year. It also has to be related to growth, and then that's the concept of DCs, that growth pays for growth. But I don't think it's just one single year requirement. There's a lot that goes into it.
Okay. Interesting. All right, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Just to respond to Councillor Mackey's question, In order to use DCs, it would need to be in the background study. So it's considered within the term of the study that we would be doing that work.
Okay. So there is I think there's a recommendation on all three of these. They're need to be addressed. So the recommendation is 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to read them out. They're there. Do I have anybody that would like to move that? I was looking at the recommendation that's here in 4. Is this not the one on? Isn't there 1, 2, and 3 on the development charges? I was just looking at this recommendation in the development charges. That's 1, 2, and 3 parts. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Dane, you're going to move it. Thank you, Scott. Mackie for seconding it. Any other questions on this one? This is 4B, 1, 2, and 3. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Good. That one is there. The next one is the leasing? No. Investment report. Garrett.
Thank you. And again, going to stay at a high level here. Any municipality that has investments is required to bring back this report to council on the balance of their investments and the investment income for the year. It provides a snapshot within the attachments of what our investments are at the end of the year. Again, I want to highlight that this is a picture, it's a point in time. Tracy, when she was talking earlier, talked about our deferred revenue being higher because of a grant that was received. So that in turn makes cash higher. It sits on opposite sides of your balance sheet. So things can fluctuate based on the timing of grants, based on the timing of large capital projects that severely impact our cash balance. But to summarize, at the end of the year 2024, the county had $125,820,000 in our cash and investment portfolio. And on that money, throughout 2024, $5,605,000 was earned in investment income. The county owns GICs, accrual notes, principal protected notes, and then the investment income earned on our general bank account balances as well makes up a large portion of it. If you look at table 1, you'll see that our interest rates are going down on what we're earning in our bank account every day. The calculation is TD Bank's prime minus 1.75%. You'll see at the end of 2024, it had fallen down to 3.877. And I can tell you that number is currently 3.2. So we'll await more rate decisions to come forward in the current year. And then there's also more graphs showing how much we had in our bank throughout each month, comparing it to previous years, and then a breakdown of how much of these investments are sitting in cash versus GIC, or sorry, cash versus short-term investments, which would be 1 to 3 year horizon, and then long-term investments, which would be 4 to 10 or 4 or greater. And you'll see that the shift to longer-term investments was done in 2023 or 2024. Sorry, just want to make sure I'm saying the right number. At the end of 2023, we had 14.98% of our portfolio was made up of long-term investments. At the end of 2024, that number is 23.85%. I can stop there if there's any questions.
Any questions for Garrett on this one? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Garrett, the one comment, the county shall invest only in securities that are expressed or payable in Canadian dollars. Does that hinder us at all?
I don't think I'd use the word hinder. I would say it protects us from fluctuations on the Canadian dollar. You can invest in US securities through PPNs if you want. But the underlying note has to be expressed in Canadian dollars. So you don't want to have a PPN that's payable and you're due $1 million, but the Canadian dollar is down. So really, or the Canadian dollar is lower than it was when you bought it. So now it's really a $900,000 investment. So it's more of a protection mechanism that's in there.
Anything else? So the recommendation is there. Do we have anybody that would want to move that? Dane and Warren. Nielsen and Dickert. Very good. No questions on that recommendation. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And now the last one. Let me get it back up here again. Will be on the leasing portion, correct? Garrett.
Thank you. Again, legislatively required report to report to council what the county has spent on leases in the year, as well as report on our long-term debt at the end of the year. In 2024, the total expense for leases was $182,000. And most of these relate to our paramedic bases that we do not own, as well as our Ontario Works satellite offices. We have no capital leases, which are leases that are structured so that you essentially own the asset, and you're leasing it over the entire life of the asset. Operating leases are more short-term and flexible for the lessee. And the county has $600,000 of debt on its books, which relates entirely to the amount payable to Bright Shores, which was the $1 million committed for the wellness center. And the remaining amount is $200,000 payable in 25, 26, and 27. Leave it at that.
Any questions on the leasing portion? Then the recommendation is there to receive. Thank you very much, Councillor Mackey. Tara. Oh, you got a question. You want to move it first and then I'll let you, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Garrett, the paramedic leases, are they leased out on a square footage basis? There's just some variances in the amounts that we're paying to different municipalities. So how is that determined?
Kevin's gone. I think most of them are on square foot basis. Our leases are with lower tier municipalities and hospitals. I don't want to say all of them are for sure, but the ones I've read are.
Okay. And the recommendation is moved by Councillor Mackey, seconder. Councillor McKeithney. Thank you, Shirley. Any other questions on the recommendation? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Garrett. That. And there was no correspondence, Tara. Is there any other business? Next meeting, July 23rd. Everybody's good with that? Nobody arguing on the 23rd? Then with all the business done, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Done. Thank you for everybody.